Hello guys, and welcome to another episode in the Shiftaholics Subaru Forester project series. Now in this episode we're going to be doing some things different. We're still working on our front end wide body modifications. However, we're going to make some changes, some wild changes. So stay tuned. So before we begin working on our fenders here, there's something I want to share with you. Initially, when we first began this project, I shared my vision of what I want this car to become once we're done with all our mods. And that is essentially a sporty version of the Forester. Something that the factory would have made if they ever made like an STI version of this generation Forester. Now, in that spirit, I really wanted to denounce, still do, the notion, the ideology of good enough. And this is why we're going to get rid of these fender flares. We're going to have to start from scratch. We're going to do a wide body design as intended initially. We're not going to take any shortcuts. It might take time, it might take some trial and error, but we're going to do a wide body design very similar to the previous generation WRX. So let's get started. So as we did before, we're going to begin by fabricating our design ideas using pieces of cardboard. So it's time to do some cutting. It's another beautiful day and we're continuing to work on our wide body fenders. But before we do anything, let me share with you the progress we've made yesterday. So here's what we were able to accomplish yesterday. We made this piece out of metal. I know it looks like an over fender, but trust me, it's not. This is going to be part of the fender. So it's not just going to sit on top of the fender. This is just to model our design. We did tackle a few issues, so I don't know if you can notice, but we actually widened this area. So the bumper used to go, actually it's not connected, so I can push it in. It's about an inch that way. I just don't want to push because it's not, I don't want to break anything yet, it's not secured. So what we did is essentially puff the bumper out, and we shaped this metal sleeve to match the contour of our bumper, and that way it looks like it was stock, it was made this way. So essentially the bumper, we pushed it out, I would say very close to an inch, if not a little more, to match with the wider fender that we made here. So the issue that we have, the little problem that we have, is the bracket that goes underneath the bumper, that goes here, is attached to the fender here. And in order to get to keep the bumper where it needs to be, to align with our wider fender, we will need to make some cuts to move the fender along with the bracket outwards. So that way we can remove the bumper when we need to, and we can put the bumper on just like stock. So what we need to do is hack into this fender to move the mounting location for this bracket that's underneath. And that's what we have to tackle next. But before doing any of that, I think what's important for us to do, while it's not too late, is remove this section that we made and make a carbon copy of it. That way it's going to be easier to make the other side, and it will give us an opportunity, because we didn't weld anything yet, we didn't tack this up to the bracket yet, so we still have a chance to easily replicate this section so we can use it for the other side.
It's not a game, it's a rich thing.
So before welding out our outer skin to this section that we made here, and by the way, this section is just wedged in there for now, but eventually it'll get tacked to the inner portion, this little lip portion of this fender. So before doing any of that welding, I think while things are still nice and open, the important thing we should do is to address this bracket issue. And I know you can't see very well here, but basically what's required to get this the contour to match the rest of the fender is to move the mounting point for the bracket outward a little bit. So this section will remain the same, but the bumper, the entire bumper will just protrude outward. But you won't notice it once we put the skin. It will look like it was meant to be that way. So let's figure this out, and then we'll move on to tacking things together. So after a couple of hours of messing with this thing, we finally got it to where we need it. So what we were able to accomplish was, it seems like a small thing, but this was actually a little bit of a struggle. So we had to modify this section of the factory fender in order to move the bumper outward, so it matches up with our wide body. And for that, we had to make a cut along this line and move this section outward a little bit. I did make a little error. So the bracket, it's on the car, but I can show you here. The bracket has a certain shape to it, and I didn't account for the angles of these clips. So because of that, it initially wouldn't line up. So what I had to do is push and kind of beat it so that it went back to the original factory angle. So that's a mistake on my part. I should have actually cut it from a little further towards the front of the car. That way the change in angle wouldn't have been such a big deal. But because I didn't go too far with this cut, it was creating problems. So I had to beat it beat the metal forward, stretch the metal forward. So now this thing, I don't want to clip it because every time you clip it and unclip it, it kind of wears it down. So I don't want to, this is the second one I bought, so I don't want to keep buying them. So yeah, so this is, you know, it aligns, the bumper goes on, everything is good. Now, the second thing we did is the section that we fabricated that aligned with the bumper, we were able to tack that up to our outer skin, and then we tacked it up to this section, this inner section of the factory fender. Now later, when everything is all said and done, we're going to go cut out everything that's inside, so the factory fender will be no more. But for now, we actually do need the factory fender because we need all the mounting points, we need all of this stuff, so we have to work with the factory fender till everything is done. Now, as far as the tack welds, this is, you know, this is just to get everything situated. Later on, we'll put more tack welds and we'll do body work, but it's a little early for that. So the next thing we have to do is just use a piece of metal, cut a piece of metal to size and curve it around so that we have this outer lip area. So it's another beautiful day in paradise, and we're making good progress on our wide body Subaru fenders. Let me show you. So as you can see, we have most of the lower section of our fender, and the front section as well, welded, tacked in place. It's not final, we will still have to go through and do some more welding later on, but for now, I'm mainly concerned about getting the shape and the fitment 100% before moving on to any type of finish work. Now what's remaining is the upper section. Now for the upper section, I didn't make a cardboard mold, so what I would have to do is probably make something out of cardboard and only then move on to the metal fabrication stage. So as far as the lower section, we're done cutting, and you know, it sits where I want it to sit. Now what we have to determine is the upper section, so that's what we're going to do next. So I have some good news and I have some bad news. Now the good news is we're done with our initial fabrication stage, at least for the passenger side fender, that is. Don't get me wrong, we still have to go and remove the fender to cut out the original fender from the back of this section. That way it's one big fender, it's not like an over fender type of situation. So we still need to do that, and we also need to finish tacking things up so that everything is nice and permanent. That kind of brings me out to the bad news. We're out of welding gas. No big deal, but it's been already a long day, and I'm afraid I have to call it a day for this episode. And we're gonna pick up in the next episode with, we'll finish things up here, and we're gonna move on to the other side, and hopefully begin on our body work. Also, I know I've been baiting people with this, and I do apologize, but these fenders took so much time. I haven't had time to get to our next thing, our next little mod for this car. So I promise in the next episode I will reveal the next mod that we're going to be doing to this car. So stay tuned. I appreciate the support. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.